Tom Miller was not the kind of man you'd expect to see running a successful cattle ranch. Standing at 6 feet 8 inches tall with shoulders that seemed to fill doorways, he looked more like someone who should be playing professional football or working as a bodyguard for celebrities. But there he was every morning at sunrise, walking through his 1,000-acre property in Montana, with a gentle smile on his face and a kind word for every animal and person he met, the locals in Pine. Valley had known Tom since he was an awkward teenager who kept growing long after everyone else had stopped. His father, old Pete Miller, used to joke that Tom ate too much of his mother's cooking and just never knew when to quit growing, but what made Tom special wasn't his size. It was the way he treated people. Despite being able to lift a full-grown calf with his bare hands, Tom spoke in soft tones and never raised his voice. Even when dealing with stubborn cattle or difficult situations, when Tom inherited the Miller Ranch 5 years ago after his father passed away, many people wondered if the gentle giant could handle the tough business of cattle ranching. They got their answer pretty quickly. Tom ran the ranch with the same kindness his father had shown, but with an efficiency that impressed even the most experienced ranchers in the area. He paid his workers fairly, treated his animals well, and built a reputation for honesty that made other ranchers want to do business with him. The ranch employed 12 full-time workers, from cattle hands to maintenance crew, and Tom knew each, one by name. He remembered their birthdays, asked about their families, and made sure they had everything they needed to do their jobs safely. But there was one position that had been giving him trouble for months. Finding a good cook for the ranch. Running a cattle ranch meant long days and hungry workers. The previous cook had retired after 20 years, and Tom had gone through 4 different replacements in 6 months. One couldn't handle the early morning hours. Another complained about cooking for so many people. The third one quit after a week, saying the ranch was too isolated. Tom was starting to think he'd have to take over the cooking himself, which worried him because his cooking skills were limited to making coffee and heating up canned soup. That's when Lisa Rodriguez answered his newspaper ad. Lisa was 32 years old, with dark hair that she always kept pulled back in a neat ponytail and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She had driven up to the ranch on a Tuesday morning in an old blue Honda that had seen better days. Tom watched from his office window as she sat in her car for a full 5 minutes before getting out, as if she was gathering courage for something much more important than a job interview. When she knocked on his door, Tom was struck by how small she seemed. At his height, most people looked small to him, but Lisa was barely 5 feet 4 inches tall. What impressed him immediately was her handshake, firm and confident, despite the nervous way she kept glancing around. "I'm here about the cooking position," she said in a clear voice that had just a slight tremor in it. Tom invited her into his office, which was really just a corner of the main ranch house that he'd set up with a desk and filing cabinets. As they talked, he learned that Lisa had worked in restaurant kitchens for over 10 years, starting as a dishwasher and working her way up to assistant chef at a popular restaurant in Denver. She had references, experience, and most importantly, she understood what it meant to cook for large groups of people. "Why do you want to work on a ranch?" Tom asked, genuinely curious. Most people with her experience stayed in cities where the restaurant scene was more active. Lisa was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the wide expanse of grassland that stretched to the mountains in the distance. "I need a change," she said simply. Sometimes you have to start over somewhere completely different. Tom understood that feeling. He'd felt the same way when he inherited the ranch and had to figure out how to make it his own rather than just a copy of what his father had built. He decided to give Lisa a chance. "The job comes with room and board," he explained. "There's a small cabin about 100 yards from the main house. It's nothing fancy, but it's private and comfortable. You'd be cooking 3 meals a day for anywhere from 12 to 20 people, depending on the season and what work we're doing. The pay is decent, and you get Sundays off unless there's an emergency." Lisa nodded at each detail, asking practical questions about kitchen equipment, food budgets, and dietary restrictions among the workers. Tom was impressed by how thoroughly she thought through the job requirements. Most of the previous applicants had focused mainly on the pay and time off. "When can you start?" Tom asked. "Tomorrow, if that works for you," Lisa replied without hesitation. That afternoon, Tom helped Lisa move her belongings into the small cabin. She didn't have much, a few boxes of clothes, some cooking equipment that she'd collected over the years, and a small collection of well-worn cookbooks. As Tom carried boxes, he noticed that Lisa kept checking her phone and looking over her shoulder toward the road, as if she was expecting someone. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," Lisa said quickly, but Tom noticed she double-checked the locks on both the front and back doors of the cabin. Before settling in, Lisa's first day in the kitchen proved that Tom had made the right choice. She arrived at 5 in the morning to start breakfast for the crew, and by the time the workers started filing into the dining area at 6:30, the smell of bacon, eggs, fresh biscuits, and coffee had everyone in a good mood before the day. Tom made it a point to eat with his crew whenever possible. It was something his father had always done, saying that a boss who was too good to eat with his workers wasn't much of a boss at all. As he sat down with his plate that first morning, he noticed how the atmosphere in the dining room had changed. The workers were more relaxed, joking with each other and taking their time with their food instead of rushing through breakfast like they had with the previous cooks. "This is incredible," said Bobby, one of the senior ranch hands. "Haven't had biscuits this good since my grandmother passed away." Lisa, who was refilling coffee cups, smiled at the compliment but didn't say much. Tom noticed that she seemed more comfortable in the kitchen than in the dining room with everyone else. She did her job efficiently and pleasantly, but she didn't join in the casual conversation that usually happened during meals. Over the next few weeks, Tom observed Lisa's routine. She was always the first person awake on the ranch, often arriving in the kitchen before 5 in the morning. She worked steadily and quietly, preparing meals that consistently impressed everyone who ate them. She seemed to have an instinct for what people needed: hearty breakfasts on cold mornings, lighter lunches during hot afternoons, and satisfying dinners that helped everyone unwind after long days of physical work. But Tom also noticed things that concerned him. Lisa always wore long-sleeved shirts, even when the temperature reached over 90 degrees. She jumped slightly whenever someone came up behind her unexpectedly, and she never seemed to fully relax. Even during quiet moments when the kitchen work was done, most noticeably, Lisa never ate meals with the rest of the group. She would prepare food for everyone else, serve it, and clean up, but Tom never saw her sit down to enjoy the meals she'd created. When he asked her about it, she said she preferred to eat later, after the kitchen was cleaned up. Tom respected people's privacy, but his protective instincts, which had been strong since childhood, were telling him that Lisa was carrying some kind of burden. He decided to keep an eye on her, not in an intrusive way, but just to make sure she was settling in okay and felt safe on the ranch. The workers quickly grew to love Lisa's cooking. She had a talent for taking simple, inexpensive ingredients and turning them into meals that felt special. Her chili became legendary among the crew, and her apple pie was so popular that Tom had to establish a rule that everyone got only one piece, until after dinner was completely finished. But it was the small touches that really impressed Tom. Lisa remembered that old Charlie, the most senior ranch hand, preferred his coffee extra strong. She made sure there were always extra vegetables for Miguel, who was trying to eat healthier after his doctor warned him about his blood pressure. And she somehow figured out that Tom had a weakness for fresh bread, so there was always a warm loaf available when he came in from working outside. After a month, Tom realized that Lisa had become an essential part of the ranch's daily rhythm. The workers were happier, more productive, and the atmosphere during meals had become one of the highlights of each day. But he also realized that, despite her excellent work and the positive impact she'd had on everyone, Lisa remained something of a mystery. She was friendly but distant, professional but guarded, and Tom couldn't shake the feeling that she was always looking over her shoulder, waiting for something bad to happen. 2 months had passed since Lisa started working at the Miller Ranch, and Tom had begun to think that maybe his concerns about her were just his overprotective nature getting the better of him. She seemed to be settling in well. The crew loved her cooking, and the ranch was running smoother than it had in years. But deep down, Tom knew something wasn't quite right. There were too many small signs that didn't add up to the picture of someone who was simply adjusting to a new job in a new place. It was a blazing hot Tuesday in July when everything changed. The temperature had been climbing since dawn, and by noon it was pushing 95 degrees with no breeze to provide relief. Most of the crew had taken shelter in the barn during the hottest part of the day, but there was still work to be done. The cattle needed fresh water, and several fence posts near the south pasture required repairs that couldn't wait. Tom had been working on the fence line since early morning, sweat soaking through his shirt as he wrestled with stubborn wire and wooden posts that seemed determined to fight him every step of the way. His stomach was starting to growl, reminding him that lunch would be ready soon, when he heard the sound of the dinner bell ringing from the main house. Lisa always rang that old brass bell to call everyone in for meals, a tradition that Tom's grandmother had started decades ago. Tom walked back toward the house, wiping his face with his bandana and looking forward to whatever delicious meal Lisa had prepared. He saw her coming out of the kitchen carrying a large metal pot. She was heading toward the outdoor dining area they used during hot weather, a covered patio area with picnic tables where the crew could eat in the shade while still catching any breeze that might come along. The pot looked heavy, and Tom could see steam rising from it even from a distance. He quickened his pace, thinking he should help her carry it, but he was still about 50 yards away when it happened. Lisa was walking carefully, using both hands to grip the handles of the pot, when her foot caught on one of the irregular stones that made up the pathway between the kitchen and the dining area. Tom watched in slow motion as she stumbled forward, trying to regain her balance while still holding onto the pot. For a moment it looked like she might recover, but the weight of the pot pulled her down, and she fell hard onto her knees. The pot hit the ground with a loud clang, sending hot stew splashing across the stones. But Tom barely noticed the spilled food. His attention was completely focused on Lisa, who was pushing herself up from the ground, and more specifically on her left arm, when Lisa fell. Her long-sleeved shirt had been pushed up past her elbow, revealing skin that made Tom's blood run cold. Her forearm was covered in bruises, dark purple ones that looked fresh, yellowish-green ones that were obviously a few days old, and faded brown marks that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd been hurt. The bruises were clearly shaped, like finger marks, as if someone had grabbed her arm with tremendous force. Tom broke into a run, reaching Lisa just as she was pulling her sleeve back down and trying to act like nothing had happened. "Are you okay?" Tom asked, kneeling beside her and instinctively reaching out to help her up. Lisa flinched away from his touch, a reaction so automatic and fearful that it answered questions Tom hadn't even known he was asking. "I'm fine," she said quickly, not meeting his eyes. "Just clumsy. I'm sorry about the stew." "I can make more." "Forget the stew," Tom said gently, staying crouched down so he wouldn't tower over her. "Lisa, your arm." "It's nothing," she said, pulling her sleeve down even further and starting to gather up pieces of the broken pot. "I bruise easily, always have." Tom had been around enough injured animals and accident-prone ranch hands to know the difference between accidental bruises and something else entirely. What he'd seen on Lisa's arm wasn't from bumping into furniture or being naturally clumsy. Those were grip marks, clear as day. He helped Lisa clean up the spilled stew without pushing her for more information, but his mind was racing. Everything about Lisa's behavior over the past 2 months suddenly made sense. The way she jumped when people approached her unexpectedly, the long sleeves in hot weather, the way she constantly checked her phone and looked toward the road as if expecting someone that evening. After the crew had finished dinner and gone back to their quarters, Tom knocked gently on the door of Lisa's cabin. He'd spent hours thinking about how to approach the situation, knowing that if he was right about what was happening, he needed to be very careful not to make things worse. Lisa opened the door but didn't invite him in. Tom could see that she'd been crying, though she was trying to hide it. More importantly, he could see a fresh bruise on her left cheek that definitely hadn't been there that morning. "Lisa," Tom said softly, "I need to talk to you. And I really hope you'll trust me enough to be honest." For a long moment, they just stood there looking at each other. Tom could see Lisa wrestling with herself, probably trying to decide whether to keep pretending everything was fine or to finally tell someone the truth she'd been carrying alone. "I don't know what you think you saw," Lisa began, but her voice broke before she could finish the sentence. "I saw enough," Tom said quietly, "and I see more right now. That bruise on your face wasn't there this morning." Lisa's hand automatically went to her cheek, and Tom saw her shoulders slump in defeat. She stepped back from the doorway, and Tom took it as an invitation to come inside. The cabin was neat and sparse, just like Lisa herself. But Tom noticed something he hadn't seen before, a suitcase sitting by the back door, partially packed with clothes. Lisa saw him looking at it. "I was going to leave tonight," she said, sinking into one of the two chairs at the small kitchen table. "I thought maybe if I kept moving, he wouldn't find me again, but I don't have anywhere else to go." Tom sat down. Across from her, his large frame making the small chair creak ominously. "Who is he?" The story came out slowly, in fits and starts, with Lisa stopping frequently to wipe away tears or to listen for sounds outside that might indicate someone was coming. Her ex-boyfriend David had been tracking her movements for months. She'd left him after 2 years of increasingly violent behavior, but he refused to accept that their relationship was over. "He found me at my last job in Denver," Lisa explained. "Showed up at the restaurant where I was working and caused such a scene that they had to call the police. My boss was understanding, but I couldn't put my coworkers at risk, so I left." "How did he find you here?" Tom asked, though he was dreading the answer. "He called yesterday," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Said he'd been watching the ranch for weeks, figuring out my routine. He came to the cabin last night after everyone was asleep." Tom felt a surge of anger unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The thought of someone sneaking onto his property to hurt Lisa made him want to put his fist through a wall, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "What did he want?" "For me to come back to Denver with him. He said he'd changed, that things would be different this time. When I told him no, he touched her cheek again. He said this was just a warning, that next time would be worse if I didn't cooperate." Tom was quiet for a long moment, processing everything Lisa had told him. He understood now why she'd seemed so nervous when she first arrived, why she always looked over her shoulder, why she kept her suitcase packed and ready to go. "Lisa," Tom said finally, "you don't have to run anymore. You're safe here." "You don't understand," Lisa said, shaking her head. "David is dangerous. He doesn't care about anyone else who might get hurt. If he thinks you're protecting me, he'll come after you too." Tom almost smiled at that. He'd been in his share of fights over the years, and while he wasn't a violent man by nature, he was more than capable of handling himself when necessary. But this wasn't about his ability to physically protect Lisa. This was about making sure she felt safe enough to stop running and start healing. "How long has this been going on?" Tom asked. 6 months since I left him. But the abuse started about a year into our relationship. It was small things at first, pushing me when he was angry, grabbing my arm too hard during arguments. Then it got worse. Tom listened as Lisa described a pattern of control and violence that had escalated over time. David had isolated her from friends and family, controlled her finances, and used both physical and emotional abuse to keep her trapped in the relationship. When Lisa finally found the courage to leave, David had made it his mission to track her down and force her to return. "I should have called the police last night," Lisa said. "But I was scared they wouldn't believe me, or that it would just make him angrier." "We can call them now," Tom offered. Lisa shook her head. "He'll just deny everything and disappear until they stop looking for him. Then he'll come back worse than before." Tom understood Lisa's fear, but he also knew that doing nothing wasn't an option. David had already proven that he was willing to trespass on private property and assault. "Lisa, there was no reason to think he would stop on his own." "Lisa," Tom said, "I want you to know that you have options. You don't have to face this alone anymore. But first, I need you to promise me something." "What? Promise me you won't leave without talking to me first?" "Whatever we decide to do about David, running away isn't going to solve the problem. Tom didn't waste any time the next morning. He was up before dawn, not because he had extra work to do, but because he had a plan to put into action. Lisa's safety was now his top priority, and he was going to make sure she never had to face David's threats alone again. The first thing he did was call his friend Jake Rodriguez, who worked for the county sheriff's department. They'd known each other since high school, and Tom trusted Jake to give him honest advice about the situation. Domestic violence cases are tricky, Jake told him over the phone. If she's willing to file a report and get a restraining order, that's the best legal protection we can offer. But you're right to be concerned. Those pieces of paper don't stop someone who's determined to cause harm. What would you do if it was your sister? Tom asked. Exactly what you're doing, Jake replied. Keep her safe by any means necessary. And document everything. If this David character shows up again, call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself unless you absolutely have to. After hanging up with Jake, Tom walked over to Lisa's cabin. She was already awake, sitting on her small front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of orange and pink. Morning, Tom said, settling into the chair beside her. How did you sleep? Not great, Lisa admitted. Every little sound had me jumping. I kept thinking he might come back. Tom nodded. We're going to fix that. I've got some ideas, but I need you to trust me. And I need you to know that nothing I'm planning will make you feel trapped or watched. This is about safety, not control. Over the next few hours, Tom made changes around the ranch that were subtle but effective. He installed motion sensor lights around Lisa's cabin, telling the crew they were for general security purposes. He rearranged work schedules so that at least 2 ranch hands were always working within sight of the main house, and Lisa's cabin during evening hours, Tom also gave Lisa a walkie-talkie that connected directly to his radio and to the one in the main ranch office. Keep this with you at all times, he told her. If anything feels wrong, even if you're not sure, you use it. Don't worry about bothering anyone. The most important change was one that Lisa didn't even know about at first. Tom started staying up later each night, positioned where he could see both Lisa's cabin and the main access road to the ranch. He told himself he was just being cautious, but the truth was that the thought of David sneaking back onto his property while Lisa slept made Tom's blood boil. For the first week after Lisa's revelation, everything seemed normal. The ranch routine continued as usual, with Lisa preparing meals that somehow seemed even more delicious than before. Tom noticed that she seemed a little more relaxed, as if sharing her secret had lifted some of the weight from her shoulders. The crew had no idea what was really going on, but they could sense that Tom was more protective of Lisa than usual. When Bobby made a joke about Lisa's cooking being so good that she must be trying to marry the boss, Tom's sharp look shut down that line of conversation immediately. Lisa's got enough to worry about without us making her uncomfortable with that kind of talk, Tom said firmly. The message was clear. Lisa was under his protection, and anyone who had a problem with it could find work elsewhere. It was on a Thursday evening, exactly 8 days after Lisa had told Tom the truth, that David made his move. Tom was in the barn checking on a mare that had seemed off her feed earlier in the day when he heard the motion sensors around Lisa's cabin clicking on. He looked out through the barn door and saw a figure moving in the shadows near the cabin's back entrance. Tom's heart started pounding, but his mind went crystal clear. He grabbed the walkie-talkie from his belt and switched it to the emergency channel that would alert Jake Rodriguez and the ranch foreman simultaneously. Code red at Lisa's cabin, he said quietly into the radio. David's here. Then Tom moved. For a man his size, he could be surprisingly quiet when he needed to be. Years of working with easily spooked animals had taught him how to move without making noise. He approached Lisa's cabin from the side, staying in the shadows until he could get a clear view of what was happening. David was exactly what Tom had expected: average height, thin build, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was running on anger and adrenaline. He was trying to force open the back door of Lisa's cabin, muttering under his breath about Lisa being stubborn and needing to learn her lesson. Tom could see Lisa through the front window of the cabin. She was pressed against the far wall, holding the walkie-talkie Tom had given her, clearly terrified but trying to stay calm. "David," Tom called out. Stepping into the light where the other man could see him clearly, David spun around, and Tom got his first good look at the man who had been terrorizing Lisa. He was younger than Tom had expected. Maybe 28 or 30, with the kind of face that probably looked charming when he was trying to impress someone. But right now his expression was twisted with rage and something that looked like panic. "Who the hell are you?" David demanded, trying to sound tough but failing to hide the fact that Tom's size intimidated him. "I'm Tom Miller. This is my ranch." "And that's my employee you're bothering," Tom said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made it clear he wasn't someone to mess with. "This is between me and Lisa," David said, attempting to stand straighter. "She's my girlfriend, and we're having a private conversation." "No, you're not," Tom replied. "She's not your girlfriend anymore, and you're trespassing on private property." "You need to leave." David's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about. Lisa and I have been together for 3 years. She's just confused right now, but she come to her senses." Tom took a step closer, and David instinctively backed up. "The only thing Lisa's confused about is why she put up with you for so long. But that's over now. You're not welcome here." "She told you lies?" David said, his voice getting higher and more agitated. "I never hurt her." "She's always been dramatic. Always making things seem worse than they are. If she's got bruises, she probably did it to herself for attention." Tom felt his temper flare at hearing David try to gaslight Lisa even when she wasn't there to defend herself. But he kept his voice level. "I saw the bruises, David. I know exactly what kind of man you are." That's when David made his mistake. Maybe it was the frustration of being confronted, or maybe he was just used to intimidating people smaller than him. But he pulled a knife from his jacket pocket. "You need to mind your own business," David said, waving the knife in Tom's general direction. "Lisa's coming with me whether you like it or not," Tom almost laughed. After years of dealing with angry bulls and spooked horses, a scrawny guy with a knife wasn't particularly impressive. But the weapon did change things. It meant David was more dangerous than Tom had initially thought. "Put the knife away, David," Tom said calmly. "You're already in enough trouble. Don't make it worse." Instead of backing down, David lunged forward with the knife. It was a clumsy, desperate move that telegraphed his intentions from a mile away. Tom sidestepped easily, grabbed David's wrist, and applied just enough pressure to make him drop the weapon. Then he spun David around and pinned his arm behind his back, holding him in place without causing injury. "Let me go," David shouted, struggling uselessly against Tom's grip. "You can't do this." "I'll sue you for assault." "You brought a knife onto my property and threatened me with it," Tom replied calmly. "That's called self-defense where I come from." At that moment, Jake Rodriguez's patrol car came roaring up the ranch road with its lights flashing but no siren. Tom had called ahead to let him know they needed to keep things quiet to avoid spooking the cattle. "Evening, Tom," Jake said as he got out of his car, taking in the scene with professional calm. "I take it this is our problem?" "This is David," Tom confirmed, still holding the other man securely. "He was trying to break into Lisa's cabin, and he pulled a knife when I asked him to leave." Jake quickly took custody of David, reading him his rights while securing him in the back of the patrol car. The knife went into an evidence bag, along with photos of the damage David had done to Lisa's back door. Lisa finally emerged from her cabin. Shaking but determined to give her statement to Jake, Tom stayed close by, offering silent support while she described what had happened and confirmed that David was indeed her ex-boyfriend who had been stalking her. "Will this be enough to keep him away?" Lisa asked Jake. "Breaking and entering, trespassing, assault with a deadly weapon, and violating the restraining order you're going to file tomorrow." "Yeah. This should put him away for a while," Jake replied. "And Tom here witnessed the whole thing, so we've got a solid case." After Jake left with David in custody, Tom and Lisa sat on her front porch, both of them coming down from the adrenaline rush of the confrontation. "Thank you," Lisa said quietly. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." "You don't have to thank me," Tom replied. "This is what decent people do. They protect each other." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, cattle settling down for the evening, the distant call of an owl, the gentle rustle of wind through the grass. The weeks following David's arrest brought a peace to the Miller Ranch that Tom hadn't expected. Lisa seemed like a completely different person. The constant tension in her shoulders had disappeared. She smiled more often, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she actually laughed at the jokes the ranch hands told during dinner. It was a sound that made Tom's heart skip a beat every time he heard it. Lisa had thrown herself into her work with renewed energy. Her meals became even more creative and delicious, if that was possible. She started experimenting with new recipes, asking the crew what their favorite foods had been growing up, and then surprising them with her own versions of those comfort foods. When she made Charlie a perfect recreation of his late wife's famous cornbread, the tough old cowboy actually teared up at the dinner table, but the biggest change was in how Lisa interacted with everyone, especially Tom. The walls she'd built around herself were slowly coming down. She started joining the crew for meals instead of eating alone in the kitchen, and she began staying after dinner to help Tom with ranch paperwork. Something she'd never done before. Those evening sessions became the highlight of Tom's day. They would sit at the kitchen table, Lisa organizing receipts and invoices while Tom worked on payroll and supply orders. They talked about everything. Lisa's dreams of maybe opening a small restaurant someday, Tom's plans for expanding the ranch, stories about their childhoods, their favorite books and movies. Tom learned that Lisa had grown up in a large family where cooking was a way of showing love, which explained why she put so much care into every meal. Lisa discovered that Tom had actually wanted to be a veterinarian when he was younger, but had given up that dream to run the family ranch when his father got sick. "You could still do it," Lisa said one evening about 6 weeks after David's arrest. "There are programs for people who want to change careers later in life." Tom smiled at her optimism. "I'm 34 years old, Lisa, by the time I finished school. I'd be pushing 40. That's a little old to be starting over. My grandmother went back to school when she was 52. Lisa replied, not looking up from the stack of feed bills she was organizing. She became a nurse and worked for 15 years before she retired. She always said it was the best decision she ever made. The way Lisa talked about possibilities, about second chances and new beginnings, made Tom think about his life differently. He'd always assumed that inheriting the ranch meant giving up everything else he might want to do. But listening to Lisa, he started to wonder if there might be ways to have both the ranch and a future. He'd never allowed himself to imagine it was during one of these quiet evenings that Tom realized his feelings for Lisa had grown into something much deeper than friendship or protectiveness. She was telling him a funny story about a disaster she'd caused in a restaurant kitchen during her first week as a cook, gesturing with her hands and laughing at her own mistakes, and Tom found himself thinking that he could listen to her voice. For the rest of his life, the realization should have scared him, but it didn't. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Lisa had become the center of his daily routine, the person he looked forward to seeing first thing in the morning and the last person he wanted to talk to before going to bed. She made the ranch feel like a real home instead of just a place where he worked. Tom was pretty sure Lisa was developing feelings for him too, though she was more cautious about showing it. Sometimes he would catch her looking at him with an expression that made his pulse quicken, but she would always look away quickly if she realized he'd noticed. She found excuses to touch him, straightening his collar when it was crooked, brushing dust off his shirt when he came in from working outside, letting her hand linger on his arm when she laughed at something he said. The whole ranch crew had started teasing them gently about their obvious connection. Bobby made comments about how Tom smiled more when Lisa was around, and Charlie kept making jokes about Tom finding excuses to spend time in the kitchen. Even the ranch hands who didn't know about David's attack could see that something special was developing between their boss and their cook. Tom was planning to ask Lisa if she'd like to go into town with him for dinner at the local steakhouse. Maybe make it clear that his interest in her was romantic rather than just friendly. He'd been working up the courage for days, rehearsing what he would say and trying to find the right moment to bring it up, but before he could make his move, David came back. It was a cold Saturday night in late September, almost 3 months after David's arrest. Tom had been in town earlier that day, picking up supplies and meeting with his accountant about the ranch's quarterly taxes. Lisa had stayed home to do some deep cleaning in the kitchen and to prep food for Sunday's meals. Tom got back to the ranch around 10:30 at night, tired but satisfied with how the day had gone. His accountant had told him the ranch was having its most profitable year ever, thanks partly to the improved morale among the workers since Lisa had arrived. Tom was thinking about sharing that good news with Lisa when he noticed that the lights were still on in her cabin. That wasn't unusual. Lisa often stayed up late reading or working on recipes. But as Tom parked his truck near the main house, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Lisa's front door was standing wide open, and he could hear voices coming from inside the cabin. One of them was Lisa's, high and frightened. The other was a man's voice that Tom recognized with a surge of rage and panic. David was back. Tom moved quickly but quietly toward the cabin, pulling out his cell phone to call Jake Rodriguez as he went. But before he could dial, he heard Lisa scream, and all thoughts of waiting for backup disappeared from his mind. Tom burst through the open door of the cabin to find David holding Lisa by the arm, his grip so tight that Tom could see his knuckles were white. Lisa's face was streaked with tears, and there was a red mark on her cheek that suggested David had already hit her at least once. "Let her go," Tom said, his voice deadly calm despite the fury coursing through his veins. David spun around, dragging Lisa with him. He looked terrible, thin and pale, with the kind of desperate look that comes from someone who has nothing left to lose. Tom realized that David must have made bail, though he had no idea how long the man had been out of jail. "You again," David snarled. "I should have known you'd show up. Can't mind your own business, can you?" "This is my business," Tom replied, taking a careful step into the cabin. "Lisa works for me, and this is my property. You're violating your restraining order just by being here." "I don't care about some stupid piece of paper," David said, his grip on Lisa's arm tightening until she whimpered in pain. "Lisa belongs with me. We have history together. You're just some cowboy who doesn't understand what real love looks like." Tom almost laughed at that. David's version of love involved stalking, threats, and violence. Tom's version involved protection, respect, and wanting someone to be happy even if it meant sacrificing his own desires. "Lisa?" Tom said gently, ignoring David completely. "Are you okay?" Before Lisa could answer, David jerked her arm viciously. "Don't talk to him. We're leaving, and this time I'm not taking no for an answer." That's when Tom saw the gun tucked into the back of David's waistband. The situation had just become exponentially more dangerous. Tom raised his hand slowly, showing David that he wasn't reaching for a weapon. "David, you need to think about what you're doing here. You're already facing serious charges from the last time you came here. If you hurt Lisa now, especially with a weapon, you're looking at decades in prison." "I'm not going to prison," David said, and Tom could hear the edge of hysteria in his voice. "Lisa and I are going to disappear somewhere where people like you can't interfere with our relationship." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Lisa said, finding her voice despite her fear. "I'll never go back to you, David. What we had wasn't love, it was control and abuse." David's face contorted with rage, and he raised his free hand as if to strike Lisa again. That's when Tom moved. Years of handling large, unpredictable animals had given Tom reflexes that most people didn't possess. He closed the distance between himself and David in 2 quick steps, grabbed the hand that was about to hit Lisa, and twisted David's arm behind his back in one smooth motion. David released Lisa and tried to reach for his gun, but Tom was ready for that too. "Lisa, get outside and call Jake Rodriguez," Tom said calmly, maintaining his hold on David, who was struggling and cursing. "Tell him David's back and he's armed," Lisa ran outside, and Tom could hear her on the phone with the sheriff's department. David was still fighting against Tom's grip, alternately begging and threatening, but Tom held him securely until Jake arrived with backup 15 minutes later. As the police led David away in handcuffs for the second time, Jake pulled Tom aside. This time he's not getting bail, Jake said grimly. Breaking bail conditions, violating a restraining order, assault, an attempted kidnapping, he's going to be locked up for a long time. After the police left, Tom found Lisa sitting on her front porch, wrapped in a blanket and shaking from adrenaline and shock. "How did he get out of jail?" she asked. The months following David's second arrest and imprisonment brought a transformation to the Miller Ranch that went far beyond just Tom and Lisa's growing relationship. The entire atmosphere of the place seemed lighter, more joyful, as if everyone could sense that something beautiful was blooming between their boss and their beloved cook. Lisa threw herself into ranch life with an enthusiasm that amazed everyone who knew her story. She started a vegetable garden behind the main house, saying she wanted to grow her own herbs and fresh produce for cooking. Tom helped her till the soil and build raised beds, and soon they were spending their early mornings together tending tomatoes, peppers, and herbs before the day's work began. The ranch hands loved watching Tom and Lisa work together. Tom, who could lift hay bales like they weighed nothing, would carefully carry delicate seedlings that Lisa had started in her cabin. Lisa, who had once been afraid of her own shadow, now felt comfortable enough to tease Tom when he was overly gentle with plants that were hardier than he thought. "You're treating that basil like it's made of glass." Lisa laughed one morning as Tom gingerly placed a small plant in the ground. "It's tougher than it looks. Kind of like someone else No," Tom replied with a grin, and Lisa blushed in a way that made his heart skip. Their relationship developed slowly and naturally. Tom was careful never to rush Lisa or make her feel pressured. He understood that, after years of David's controlling behavior, she needed to feel like she had complete control over the pace of their romance. Some evenings they would sit on her porch talking until midnight. Other nights, Tom would simply walk her to her cabin door, squeeze her hand gently, and say goodnight. The first time Tom kissed Lisa was on a crisp October evening, 6 weeks after David's final arrest. They had been walking back from checking on a sick calf in the north pasture, and Lisa had been telling Tom about her plans to try making homemade pasta for the crew. "You know," Tom said, stopping in the middle of the path, "I keep thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky how?" Lisa asked, looking up at him in the moonlight. "Lucky that you answered my job posting. Lucky that you trusted me enough to tell me the truth about David. Lucky that you decided to stay even when things got scary." Lisa smiled, reaching up to touch Tom's face gently. "I'm the lucky one? You saved my life in more ways than one?" When Tom leaned down to kiss her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Lisa melted into his arms, and for the first time in years, she felt completely safe and completely loved at the same time. Word of their relationship spread through Pine Valley faster than wildfire, but the reaction was entirely positive. The local shopkeepers, who had watched Tom grow up, were thrilled to see him happy. The other ranchers, who respected Tom's judgment, welcomed Lisa warmly into their community. Even Tom's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who was known for being critical of everyone, declared that Lisa was exactly what that boy needed. As winter approached, Tom and Lisa settled into a routine that felt like they'd been together for years rather than months. Lisa would wake up early to start breakfast, and Tom would join her in the kitchen with fresh coffee and updates about the animals. They worked side by side preparing meals for the crew. With Tom handling the heavy lifting while Lisa managed the actual cooking, the ranch hands started joking that Tom and Lisa were like an old married couple, the way they seemed to read each other's minds and work together so seamlessly. When Bobby mentioned this one day at lunch, Tom and Lisa exchanged a look that made everyone at the table grin. "Don't give him any ideas," Lisa said, pretending to be stern, but her eyes were sparkling with happiness. "Too late for that," Tom replied, and the crew erupted in good-natured laughter. But Tom was serious about those ideas. By December, he knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Lisa. He started thinking about how to propose, wanting to make it special but not overwhelming. Lisa had had enough drama in her life. What she deserved was something beautiful and peaceful and full of love. Tom decided to ask Lisa's best friend, Carmen, for advice. Carmen had driven up from Denver for a weekend visit, and Tom could tell that she approved of him completely. She'd told him privately that she'd never seen Lisa so happy and relaxed. "She loves you," Carmen told Tom as they sat on the main house porch while Lisa was busy in the kitchen. "Not just because you protected her from David, but because of who you are. You make her laugh, you listen to her dreams, and you never try to control her. After what she went through, that means everything." "I want to ask her to marry me," Tom said quietly, "but I don't want to scare her. Marriage might feel too much like being trapped after what David put her through." Carmen smiled. "Tom, Lisa talks about your future together all the time. She's not scared of commitment with you. She's scared of not being good enough for the life you could give her. She still can't quite believe that someone like you could love someone like her." That conversation helped Tom understand what Lisa needed to hear. His proposal shouldn't just be about his love for her. It should be about showing her how much he valued her as a partner and an equal. Tom planned his proposal for a snowy morning in early February. He woke up before dawn and prepared a simple breakfast of coffee, fresh biscuits, and Lisa's favorite strawberry jam. Then he walked over to her cabin and knocked gently on the door. "What are you doing up so early?" Lisa asked when she opened the door, but she was smiling as she invited him in. "I wanted to make you breakfast for once," Tom said, setting the tray on her small kitchen table. "You take care of everyone else all the time. I thought you deserved to be taken care of." They ate together as the sun came up, painting the snow-covered ranch in shades of pink and gold. Tom had never been so nervous in his life, but Lisa seemed completely relaxed, talking about her plans for the day and laughing at stories. Tom told about the antics of the ranch's newest calves. When they finished eating, Tom reached across the table and took Lisa's hands in his. "Lisa," he said, his voice slightly shaky with nerves, "this past year has been the best year of my life. Not just because I fell in love with you, but because you made me want to be a better man. You brought joy and warmth to this ranch in ways I never expected." Lisa's eyes began to fill with tears, and she squeezed Tom's hands. "I know your past with David made you afraid of promises and commitments," Tom continued. "But I want you to know that what I'm offering you isn't about control or possession. It's about partnership. It's about building a life together where we both get to be exactly who we are." Tom got up from his chair and knelt beside Lisa, pulling a simple but beautiful ring from his pocket. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was exactly right. A classic design that would look perfect on Lisa's hard-working hands. "Lisa Rodriguez," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything, running this ranch, building our future, maybe raising a family if that's what we both want? Will you let me love you and take care of you for the rest of our lives?" Lisa was crying openly now, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Tom Miller, I will marry you. I want all of that with you." When Tom slipped the ring onto Lisa's finger, it fit perfectly, just like everything else about their relationship. They held each other as the morning sun streamed through the cabin windows, both of them crying happy tears and making plans for their future. The wedding took place on the ranch on a beautiful Saturday in late May. Lisa wore a simple white dress that she'd chosen herself, and for the first time since Tom had known her, she wore short sleeves without any self-consciousness about the faded scars on her arms. Those marks were part of her story, but they no longer defined her. Tom wore his best suit and a tie that Lisa had picked out for him, saying it brought out the color of his eyes. When he saw Lisa walking toward him across the ranch yard with the mountains in the background and wildflowers in her bouquet, Tom thought his heart might burst with happiness. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, officiated by the local pastor who had known Tom's family for decades. The entire ranch crew was there, along with neighbors and friends from town. Carmen was Lisa's maid of honor, and Jake Rodriguez stood up as Tom's best man when they exchanged vows. Tom promised to love and protect Lisa, but also to support her dreams and never try to control her choices. Lisa promised to trust Tom with her heart and to build a future with him based on love, respect, and partnership. "You may kiss your bride," the pastor said, and when Tom and Lisa kissed, the entire gathering erupted in cheers and applause. At the reception, which featured a meal that Lisa had planned and cooked herself with help from several local women, the ranch hands gave speeches about how Lisa had changed their lives with her kindness and cooking. Charlie, the oldest member of the crew, stood up with tears in his eyes. "I've worked on this ranch for 30 years, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I watched Tom grow up, and I've never seen him as happy as he's been this past year. Lisa, you didn't just become our cook, you became our family. And Tom, you found yourself a woman who's as strong as she is kind. You two are perfect for each other."